Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Lost of Lieutenant. I am your host, Jacob, and I'm joined by...
Nick?
And Tristan.
Yes, Tristan's back. Another episode with our special guest, Nick. No, special guest,
Nice
Tristan.
one, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've been usurped due to a fucking verbal fluff. And in this episode, we are going to discuss conducting or hosting a slow grow, a sort of tournament structure that's really good at promoting newer players or starting a new community, especially when there is none. That involves sort of a increase in points as you go along in tournaments, with a focus on building a new army or starting Infinity in general, and sort of starting from the ground up. So we'll be talking with Tristan, who's recently just run a slow grow here in Melbourne. Has it come to an end yet?
It has.
Yeah, cool.
Yes.
So we'll talk about, the points you run it at, and some sort of our opinions on, I guess, how they've run in ones that we've been in before, or how we feel that they should be run in the future. Have you been in a slow grow, Nick?
This is my second slow grow in Melbourne.
Okay, so you participated in this one with Tristan. Tristan was running.
This one of Tristan, and then last year's that was run, I think, by Peter.
Yeah,
But I could be wrong. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
Peter Henry.
Yeah. So I suppose, just for the tiniest bit of background for our listeners, there's probably one slow go a year in Melbourne.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
that's all you really have
right.
time for.
Yeah, and by that point, you've probably exhausted the new player base, and then they're ready to jump into bigger and better tournaments, I suppose. But just before we get into it, we'll do our hobby catch up. I'm talking about doing hobby and doing games. I sort of know what Tristan's going to mention, so I'm going to let Nick go first.
Most of my games that I've gotten in the past couple of weeks have all been the slow grow, so I will defer that until we talk about slow grows.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So I suppose the one thing we'll mention. I know myself.
Mhm.
I'm garbage at painting and all that sort of thing, and doing it to any sort of time limit. What did you play in the slow grow?
I played Assassins in the first one, and then went Vanilla Hawk for the second two and third.
Okay, that's an
So-
interesting one. I'll actually pick your brain a little bit about that. When we get to the actual discussion. All right, Tristan, go for it. Do your little fucking celebration.
I won't start with painful stuff. So, as most people in Melbourne should be aware, our next big tournament, Arcfinity, is this weekend. A nice big 2-day event, and there is a fully painted requirement. So I have been painting my butt off, trying to get all my Shazvasti done in time so I can actually play the tournament that I paid to go to.
Yeah.
So in the past few days, I have painted about 10 models because they are super quick to paint. Just a couple speed paints, and I've done a nice Zenithal with an airbrush, so it's all nice and lovely looking.
Yeah. This
so
is why
that's-
I'm not going to Arcfinity, because I'm
Oh.
garbage at painting. I had plenty of time. Don't get me wrong. It's got nothing wrong to do with Arcfinity or anything like that. I'm just a horrible hobbyist. I'm a horrible hobbyist. So
Me
my aim is to be painted by the next Burn City. No, but next Burn City Brawl. I've really given myself some time. But hopefully, with 5 months head start, or 4.5, however you look at it, I'll be able to, have a really nicely painted army.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Tickets to a tournament with painting requirement is a good way to incentivize you to paint.
absolutely.
That was how I painted my very first miniatures army. Is I bought tickets to a tournament, and it was fully painted, and it was multi-day, included hotel, the whole bit. So I didn't want to miss out on that.
Yeah, I remember my first CanCon. I really tried to get my steel phalanx painted. Didn't quite get there, but I've had about 75%. right? Probably even more than that. But when I did really well in my first CaneCon, so when I got home, I was like, this army needs to be. I need to finish the guys that I took, so that if I ever like took this army again, it's fully painted. Yeah.
Moving on to the
yeah. Go on.
So
you know what?
Jacob
You know.
and
You know
I-
what? You know what? This is my hobby time. I'm gonna
Go
talk
for it.
about it.
Go
So last week I had a game with Tristan, my Bakunin, versus his or the new Torchlight Brigade. Playing, believe it or not, Tristan's mission Supply Run, which is going to be one of the ones at this coming up Border Bash.
Supply Raid.
Oh, Supply Raid. Sorry, yes, Supply Raid, which is a very unique mission in the way that it's set up. In that, and we were talking about it when we played the game, is that it doesn't really give a huge advantage to first or second turn. Like, there's pros and cons to both, and the decision is actually decently difficult. Like, it'll literally depend on your opponent, the table, your army, everything. But I got to learn the strengths and weaknesses of Torchlight Brigade, and one of the biggest one being a fucking linked up Prime.
The Prime or the Vidocq? Because, well, I guess it's 50-50 on which caused more pain.
The Vidocq, like the Vidocq got very lucky.
Yeah.
But the Prime was just like, I just put your like dice to be not great, and I'm got tons of burst, and I think he's what, +1 damage, is he?
Damage 16. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So he is. So that I tried to do the plan that I had for my list, and I tried to stick to it. Which in this particular case wasn't a good idea. I should have improvised a little bit, because when we looked at it, I really should have, in hindsight's 2020, spent my entire first turn trying to kill that Prime. But yeah, so we played that. It was relatively close game until the very end. If there's anything that losing enough helps you learn, is how to recover when you've got not those many orders and not those many models left. But yeah, in the end, Tristan managed to not pull out the win, managed to win with more boxes extracted, more of them smashed, and more
No, I think we tied.
classifieds.
I think we tied Smash.
Yes, sorry, yes, you tied up Smash, but there's no points in tying the smashing.
Yes. So I think it was a 7-3. Yeah. I got 4 boxes, more boxes, and 2 classifieds, and then you got 3 boxes
and the same,
or 2 boxes and a classified, or something like. Yeah.
No,
it ended up being 7-3.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it was a good game. It's a really good mission. It's one where we were sort of talking, I think, as a community at the time, about the fact that it's like hackers and engineers get the 2 dice +3 whip bonus, and you just didn't see anyone else get them. So yours has, and it makes thematic sense because it's about like forward observing boxes for extraction. Yeah. The forward observer skill gets the bonus, and I suppose unlike hacker or engineer, where some armies don't have any access to them, at the very least, almost every army has access to forward observers. Although that being said, of all the armies, I think Bakunin probably has one of the worst accesses to it, because even the basic moderator doesn't have a forward observer profile.
But even in saying that, you still have an infiltrating forward observer, so
there's
not many factions that miss out on having a decent forward observer.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Bakunin is like, I would say, like base, almost like sort of base level access to like forward observing profiles, where you've got the toolbox, you've got an infiltrator, and they just miss out on having like a basic troop with it, which is odd, right? But for the most part, you're going to have a basic trooper with it. You're going to have an infiltrating thing with it, and you're going to have the like forward observer bot with it. Yeah. Yeah, and then there's obviously difference. Like for you, well, not for you, for O12, the Raven Eye is an incredible unit for this particular mission because they're all forward observers.
Specifically for Torchlight, it's incredible because they're just wild. They're basically wild cards. They're not wild cards. They can be in rover links, but you can put them in pretty much any link.
Yeah, I mean, aren't they kind of the glue even in like Starmada?
Well, yes, they can join hacker Kappa links in Starmada, and they count as Kappas. So
Yeah.
they're really good in Kappa links, but generally you don't want that link to move, which is a bit.
Yeah, that's true. Which
Yeah.
goes against what you're doing in that particular.
But they are very
list.
good. It's a 12-point forward observer.
But
You
yeah,
can't get much
so
better.
at the very least, I because again, the way the mission's put together is you can also smash the boxes and just hold on to them until the end of the game. And so stuff that I stopped using in Bakunin because it didn't really fit. It didn't really fit into just the way the game's played. Suddenly became really valuable in the upcoming BCB. Because there's quite a few missions where not having a specialist and just being able to smash is actually probably pretty worth it. Anything else we want to cover with our hobby stuff? No?
I got a massive Warsenal supply box.
You did, that's right. You did bring new terrain to our last game.
Oh, so that's my old Art of War box. Yesterday I got about $1,200 worth of Warsenal stuff. So when Ark's over, I'm getting down to it.
One man tournament terrain bringer at this point. Wouldn't that make it your third table's worth of terrain?
Or I have about 5. 2 live in my car. I've got a couple upstairs, and then I've just got a box of random stuff you could make another table out of, but it doesn't really fit together. But yeah, I've got a lot.
At one point, it's gonna be like those cartoons. So I'm gonna with an abandoned child on the porch. I'm gonna hear a doorbell, footsteps running away from my door, and it's just this box of terrain with "Please take care, Tristan."
Yes, I have enough to give away.
Yeah, as far as like Infinity news goes, we haven't seen a huge amount. Obviously, Torchlight came out, but you guys did the review of it. Some
Torchlight
people
shipped today, if that's important.
Yeah, I actually saw a community friend, Sam. He's got his Torchlight Brigade as well as I think he's got the O12 reinforcements as well as something else. I don't remember what he got.
The bounty hunter.
Yes.
Yeah, so
limited bounty hunter.
So he's got himself everything for Torchlight at the very least because it's got all the new units, the Nightshades and the MetTech or whatever they're called.
It doesn't have a Nightshade. That's in a separate blister, but it does have new cool stuff.
What's the like ninja one you get?
That's in a blister. That's a new blister. I'm not sure about a ninja one. The reinforcement pack has 3 jackboots, a Ment, 2 Vidokes. I think that's it. I think it's only 6 models.
Oh, you don't get the Nightshade.
The Nightshade is a blister that's coming out either next month or the month after.
Oh, okay, fair enough. And as well as, I mean, the other one that's coming is there's Atalanta coming, the Demonist. Which what do we think of those 2 models? I quite like Atalanta's new model. I don't like. I'll be honest. I don't like that. I do enjoy the old bunny bot that she had. But I think her new, like they've kept her very much the same. I think she's still got the same sort of hairstyle and armor style. They've just instead of her having like the tennis or cheerleading skirt, they've given her like the pleated skirt. They've just given her like, pants and a tabard or something like that. And the Demonist.
I think they look good. Not that I'll ever, if I was playing Bakunin, I would probably never run a Demonist, but the model's cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can run it in vanilla,
Vanilla.
luckily. I mean, it means it can try and feed into things. Yeah, it's one of those things where they've put a lot of effort into a model that probably won't see necessarily a lot of um a lot of table time.
I see a lot of proxy potential in it, to be honest.
True, that's very true.
Because you
And
can
they,
use it as two separate models if you really wanted to.
yeah, that's true. Just taking a quick look here. Yeah, so they've made Atalanta a bit more like sort of rough and tumble. I guess sort of giving the air that I think still Phalanx is going for a little bit more, as to be, I guess, a little bit more serious looking.
I'm liking the new trend of putting crouching models on a box on a platform so it still has the S2 height. There's a bunch of old models where they're crouching and stuff, and sometimes you can't see them.
Yeah, so I have that problem because I frequently take the Moira sniper, and she's in a crouching position, which means that she looks like she's an S1 height, and people will look and not like over the table and not see her. And I have to be like, no, she's taller than she is. So with her, I'm planning to base her on like a platform, looking out through like a church window. I got all the bits. I just have to print them out. But all right, we've talked about a hobby and Infinity. Let's get on to just our challenge announcements, as well as our community, like our public service announcements. Get the tournaments announced. And the first thing we're going to do is, we announced it on our Facebook and on our Discord, all of our socials, but we're going to announce it here. Is that our Q1 challenge is complete, and we are moving on to our Q2 challenge. So this Q2 has a bit of a theme, which is you plus me equals carnage. So while we're transitioning to longer form challenges, we're finding that people are more likely to engage in both parts of the challenge or not at all. So here at Lost Lieutenant, we've decided to merge the hobby and gaming challenges. We still be rewarding 2 entrants right with the prizes, and picked at with a random number generator. And for this quarter, we want to take a look at fireteam duos. So for the hobby challenge, or the hobby portion of this challenge, we just want to see somebody. You pick a duo from vanilla. From, if there's a unique one in a fire team, just paint them up, right, and show us show us the results. But we also want to see your experience in playing with some duos. There's some pretty damn strong ones out there. The one that comes to mind for me is anything almost attached to the Bakunin Stigmaton. Right, it can drag along with it some engineers, both in the form of the new man spiders as well as the orphan observants. Do you guys think of any good duos off the top of your head you like the run? Or like the look
The
of?
one that I experienced playing against Leda most recently was with the Wrecker. So very similar to the Stigmata pulling around support. It was a Wrecker pulling around its own engineer.
Funnily enough, I was about to say a Squalos Mark II and a Blade. That seems to be the new rage for Pano players.
Oh yeah, is that like the a Squalos with like a close combat defense? Is it?
It's the smaller Squalos.
So it's the S6 Squalos with NCO, and the
Oh,
Blade also has tack aware, and it's an engineer, so it's 5 orders from 2 models.
oh, that's fucking nasty.
It's pretty good.
So send your photos in of the duo that you painted up. All right, or send us in a gameplay report to lostoflieutenant@gmail.com. And for each challenge, one one winner will be chosen randomly to receive a small box or blister from the Infinity range retailer to be determined. We'd also like to remind our listeners or anyone watching on YouTube that we do have a Patreon at Loss of Lieutenant. At patreon.com/Loss of Lieutenant. We understand that not everybody can commit financially to supporting their local Infinity podcast. And if that's the case, we'd really love it if you just let Aleph know that you like what we produce by liking, following, and leaving a review wherever you find our podcasts, as well as any sort of interaction with our Facebook. We also have a Discord server, a Lost Lieutenant Discord server. The link will always be provided. An invite link will always be provided in the description of this episode. On to events. I'm going to take a rest for a bit and let Nick have a shot.
Yeah. So have 2 upcoming events on the schedule. We've got Border Bash coming up in June. This will be a 2-day tournament, the 8th and 9th of June. So that's King's Long birthday weekend in Mirrambina Community Centre in Lavington, New South Wales. So that's roughly the border area there. Across the 2 days, the missions will be Power Pack, Acquisition, Evacuation, Frontline, and Supplies. Early bird tickets are still available at $75, and you can look at their Facebook for more details. Following that, we've got the next Burn City Brawl coming up soon. Well, I guess we're closer to it than the previous Burn City Brawl. So Burn City Brawl 2024 will be a 2-day ITS tournament like the previous ones. This one will be held 7th and 8th of September, and it'll be at the Gaming Arena in North Coburg, Victoria. The 5 rounds for that one will be Supply Raid, as you mentioned previously, the custom mission from the Lost Lieutenant mission pack. Highly classified, decapitation, looting and sabotage, and finished off with supremacy.
It's going to be a pretty decently violent BCB.
Yeah.
Because Supply Raid is nothing like supplies.
Nope.
Like,
there are supply boxes, and that's about the end of the similarities.
Yeah,
way more looting and sabotaging, take supplies, squash them together, and times it by 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's pretty much an offspring of them blessed by the old tic-tac-toe.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think we've only been going for a little bit. So why don't we forge ahead? Take a break later while we talk about the slow grow.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned at the top of this episode, the main topic today will be talking about organizing, participating in sort of all things to do with a slow grow league. So I'll go into a little bit more detail before we sort of open it up for a bit more discussion on what a slow grow is, and feel free to correct me at any time. But a slow grow is essentially the basic idea of it is that anyone participating in the slow grow starts a new army, and the tournament or the league is held over however many successive rounds, generally 3, where you start at maybe 150 points, 250 points, and then you move on to 300 points. Obviously, the points can change. And what that allows you to do, or what it encourages you to do, is to, at the very least, start playing an army that you haven't played before, with, depending on how you incentivize people, with the hopes of maybe you get them painted before each sort of little mini tournament, but at the very least that you obviously have sort of your new miniatures put together for each round. That sound about right?
Yeah, it gives the new players some time where they can start in a smaller game, fewer miniatures, get them together, learn the rules in a smaller game size, and then slowly expand that to get up to the full 300 points.
Yeah, so I mean that's sort of the first, I guess, thing to consider when dealing with a slow grow is why do you want to run the slow grow? You just mentioned then, Nick, that well, sorry, as a person running the slow grow, Tristan, did you have a particular reason why you wanted to run it?
So I was talking with Peter, and we were trying to figure out a specific time to slot in a slow grow, because we do run 3 events, generally over 3 months. So there has to be a big enough gap between set events throughout the year that you can actually fit it in. It just so happened that after CanCon and before ARC, there was space for a slow grow. So the general idea was for someone to start a new army and build it up to be fully painted and ready for ARC, which has a fully painted requirement. It had the added bonus this year of actually bringing us a lot of new players who just came out of the woodworks. I have no idea where they came from.
But darn, that was one of my questions for you.
So one of my conundrums with this game is Infinity is a very complicated game, and I feel like it's actually very difficult to get into unless you have the right teacher. And somehow there was 2 groups of people, maybe 6, 7 people in total, that were just lurking on Infinity Melbourne. They went, "Oh, there's a slow grow. That sounds cool," and they all just jumped on board. Right. So we had about 6 or 7 new players this round.
So that's interesting. Like you talk about sort of the idea of you doing the slow grow is like, hey, let's try and do like new armies for ARC, or at the very least, like sort of push people a little bit harder to get their models ready for ARC, as like far as the full painting. But when I was thinking like general reasons to start a slow grow, obviously,
absolutely, new players is absolutely the number one reason.
Yeah, so like if you were in a place where you had no Infinity community, but you like people keep talking about it, you're like, fuck, how do I want to get this started, but how do I sort of do it slowly so, you know, people don't get, I guess, like shocked by the cost, or at least able to spread it out over the next couple of months. A slow grow, obviously in this case, because it wasn't even your aim, is a good way of, you know, either starting a community, like revitalizing a community with new players,
absolutely,
as well as like in your case, getting ready for a particular event in a fun way. Because I imagine the missions that you did,
very ARC inspired.
Yeah, yes. Very ARC inspired.
Yes. So the first round wasn't particularly ARC inspired. We can get into that if you want. But yeah, the round 2 and 3 were definitely ARC prep. If you're going to pick missions, may as well pick missions that people need to play for another event.
Yeah. So you.
Yeah, I wouldn't normally recommend Frostbite into a slow grow league, but it is in the upcoming tournament that you were trying to prep for. So.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that like it, because like your goal, Tristan, was not necessarily to get new players involved in it. That was just a happy accident. You know, putting in a mission that's like weird and wonderful and might be very difficult to do with a slow grow. You know, it's fine.
It's also a good time where you mentioned just not just growing the community but also revitalizing it. Because in Australia, kind of our yearly season kind of ends with CanCon being the ultimate end of the year, or even the start of the new year. And there's typically a kind of gap, a little bit of time to cool off from pushing to get your armies prepped and going to CanCon. So that's a really good time to slot in something like this where people might be burnt out on the army they've been pushing for the past year, and give them a chance to pull off something that's been gathering dust on the shelf, or that they've had their eye on for a while, to give them the opportunity to go, well, okay, I'll put that aside. I'm a little burnt out on that army, but I can just jump back into the game with a new faction.
Yeah. I actually like see this question a lot, especially when you look a little bit further, like a field on like Infinity discussions. So I just want to sort of interested if you had that this sort of interaction is when you were advertising you were gonna do this slow grow, right? Just I suppose how like what did you actually like do to let people know that you were gonna run it?
So to start off with, normal channels would be your whatever local Facebook page you have, whatever local Discord you have. So for us in particular, it was Infinity Melbourne and Loss of Lieutenant Discords, and Infinity Melbourne on Facebook. I'm not going to claim I did anything special because I didn't really advertise anywhere past that. I didn't. I would say if you're specifically aiming for new players, you could try and advertise some demo games on a general wargaming page that might be more focused on 40k or Sigma or something like that. I didn't do that personally. As you said, I wasn't really aiming to get new players because I didn't really think they existed. But I was very surprised. I was very surprised by that. But if you are aiming for new players, I would probably jump over to some different Discords, maybe ask some permissions or some general pages, and just see if people want some demo games. See the general interest in your community, and if there is a large interest for a skirmishy sci-fi game, then maybe see about people getting into a slow grow.
Yeah, and the reason I ask is I see a lot. I think this is probably more true for like American Infinity players, is that the communities are a little bit just further spread apart. And I see a lot of questions of like, how do I find people? Like, how do I start a community? And the fact is just like, the only other thing I can think of is do what Ark is doing now, and you print out a little poster to put in your, local games thing and let people know to contact you. It's about it. That's if you're really desperate.
Unfortunately, Infinity doesn't really have the poster presence of the other games, so it's kind of up to you to be a bit of a salesperson. So if you're not good at that, maybe, I don't know, do some practice or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of down to you to kind of sell Infinity to people through the models or the rules or the uniqueness of it.
Yeah. Make sure when people's heads turn and they ask you what game you're playing, that you tell them about it. Because Infinity, especially with the terrain, does turn heads.
Yeah, it does.
Right? It's not like Warhammer. Everyone knows, they see it. Maybe if your models are really well painted, they'll stop and take a look at what you're doing. But when people see Infinity and the like complex terrain and the models and everything, and like they watch you duck down and things like that, people do get quite interested.
I see lots of people asking about the sheer amount of tokens and widgets and stuff you just have on the side of the table.
Yeah.
So, when you were planning the league, how did you pick the venues?
So, I won't take the credit entirely for myself. Kevin helped quite a bit with organizing the slow grow as well, and he had a good idea that to try and get everyone involved to some degree, we run it at 3 different venues.
Yeah.
The first venue was the Collingwood Library, which was I really like that venue, so we went there first.
Yeah, it's also pretty central to everybody.
It's central city essentially. So it's equidistant for everyone except maybe Geelong, out west.
Even then, it's still the best place for it.
West.
Like it's
it's
ever so slightly east of the city, but it's like
it's not as close as Gaming Arena, I want to say. If Nick can attest to that,
it's not like
it is
walking distance
more
from...
central. So if you're not in one of the public transit spokes that it's on, it's head into the city and just take the train. I think 2 or 3 stops out of the CBD.
Yeah,
I know for a fact it's 3 because I have to take it to get to work.
There you go.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a fourth stop, but it is after 3.
Yeah, so we plan to do different venues every time. So we had Central with Collingwood Library. Round 2 was at House of War in Ringwood, which is southeast south. And the final round was at the BCB venue Gaming Arena in Coburg, which is, I think, is slightly north of the city, I want to say. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
I'm really bad with geography.
It is. It just always reminds me of like, if it's the same venue that I'm thinking of, it's one that's really close to Kevin, so he's like, oh, it's so great, I don't have to wake up early.
I think Kevin's a 10-15 minute drive or something on those lines.
Okay, well that's a really good thing to point out though, is that if you're trying, like in your city or your area, you're trying to sort of use a slow grow in order to get new players, it might be worth doing exactly what you did. Is you go like, oh, I'll do one sort of central-ish, right, and then like left or right of the city, well, north or south, east or west, depending on what you're looking, what your city looks like. But that sounds to me like a really good idea, because it means that if someone can go to, someone is able to feel really involved, if they're able to at least go like, oh, it's easy for me to get to the first, and it's sort of just as easy for me to get to the third, which would be somebody going to Collingwood and Coburg for yours, and they're like, oh, I'll spend a month, really hammering out hobby stuff in the one I missed because House of War's are really out of the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's actually a really that's a really interesting sort of thing to consider, running it such that people can easily get to it.
It also shows that you have, if you have, assuming you live in a large enough area that you have multiple game shops, it shows that you have different venues in the city that will support that game.
Yeah, exactly.
Not necessarily in selling the miniatures, but at least in there are different areas around that you can play. You can meet up with people to play that specific game at that venue.
Yeah, it's also about pushing weekly games as well. Like Collingwood is a bit different, but House of War and Gaming Arena, if someone slow growers at House of War, they went, oh, that's a bit too far, I'm going to back off, they don't check Infinity again. They see there's one at Gaming Arena, and then they see that there's a gaming night at Gaming Arena every Thursday or every Friday or whatever like that. Suddenly they start getting pulled into the community a little bit.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's also about pulling people not just to these 3 events, but into the weekly games, into getting involved with the community, into meeting everyone.
Yeah, we just need to find some random place that can bring Werribee and Geelong into it.
Isn't there Guff in Werribee?
What? There's Guff, and there's been some attempts for them to revitalize, but I don't think it's quite caught yet. Though with Werribee losing its game shop, then we might be able to get more. Oh, sorry, no, Geelong losing its game shop, we might be able to get more people to Werribee.
The problem with this is just for the Australian listeners, I suppose. The problem with Geelong and Werribee is they're still kind of far apart.
Werribee is the end of one of the train lines, and Geelong is another half-hour drive past that.
Yeah. So I'm not sure. I think I know what the difference is, but I'm not sure. Just for everyone else, and either of you can jump in to explain the difference between slow grow and an escalation league.
I think the main difference there is just that the slow grow is an escalation league that is specifically geared toward newer players and designed to be more friendly and a better entry point for new players.
Yeah, absolutely. We pretty much had a slow grow and an escalation league running in tandem. That I didn't even know there was an escalation league until someone said they were playing in it. And from the sounds of it, it sounded like let's have fun at a smaller points, and then let's build up and have fun at this. There wasn't any focus on painting or like teaching new players or anything like that. It was more like a let's have fun kind of thing.
Yeah,
let's run something a little bit different than the classic 3-round 300-point tournament.
Yeah, so the escalation league, is that like the points level, is that on the same day?
For example, I think you could. I don't think they did, but for example, they ran a 150-point tournament the same that we did, but there weren't any real limitations on it. So we had a couple Melbourne people saying like, "Ooh, I can run a tag in this 150-point list," and you're like, "Okay, that might not be fun. If there's any new players, it might not be fun to chuck your tag on top of a building and put it in suppressive, because then they get, they don't know what to do."
Yeah.
So it's not
Well, I
super
guess
player friendly in that degree.
that leads us to a good another point of how, if your goal of the slow grow is to make it new player friendly, how do you make it new player friendly? How do you try to level the playing field a bit with the established players versus new players?
Yeah, so I think, Nick, you can attest to this. You might have seen me pretty much every conversation I had with someone about slow grow, the first round specifically, I was like, please don't go nuts.
Mhm.
I've seen the sign-ups. There's 4 or 5 new people. It's obviously like a normal tournament. You have 2 lists. Make a list to play against your veteran buddy, and then make a list that's a little bit toned down to play against new players, and you can kind of show them a little bit of new stuff, but not everything.
Because I was going to ask if sort of you got partly an established, like an established community, a veteran guy goes, oh, I really want to start off, I've been playing, I don't know, whatever, Ayla for a while. I want to get into the to combined army. I'm going to take part in this slow grow and play and all that sort of thing. Do you, obviously you did. They obviously had the conversation with the veteran players of like, hey, there's a lot more newer players here. Like, don't go like absolutely ham with all like the broken profiles at this point.
Yeah. And we also did have a couple rules for the first round specifically.
What were they?
From memory, it was nothing over 50 points.
Mm-hmm.
There was a limit of 1 impersonator or 1 ferroware model, because I knew there was a couple Toha players. No tags. I don't think anything with 3 wound. Well, 50-point limit means no tags.
Yep.
I
think that was about it, because I think that the 50-point ended up being a pretty good cutoff.
Yeah. The biggest one is no more than 2 impetuous models.
Oh yes.
Find on small tables, if you're getting free orders to move up the table, you'll impetuous and you'll be in chain rifle range, or you'll be in flamethrower range, and that's really
the benefits from the impetuous order are far greater when you have 8 to 10 models on a 24 by 32 than when you have 15 models on a 4x4.
The other one that might not sound as important, but is 1 combat group. Because there are some factions out there, like Shazvasti or maybe Vanilla Yujing, that can just pump 5-point models. And that's not fun either.
Yeah. But that also helps with newer players, because the combat group system is something that is a little counterintuitive when you first come in from a different type of war game, where you have to split your forces into 2 groups, and there's no way to make it perfect. There's always going to be an argument for moving 1 model back or forth. So if you restrict to 1 combat group, new players don't have to worry about balancing their combat groups before they start. They can get the feel of what 1 combat group works like, and then you add a 2nd combat group.
With the restriction on 1 combat group, were people still able to do? I don't remember what the strategical use for the combat token is.
So, yes, I believe you were.
There were some issues with that, because using direct action missions, several of them gave tactical awareness to a model, which meant that you couldn't use O12 Prestige in that mission until your tactical awareness model was no longer in the combat group. So it had to be dead and off the board. In a way, it also just meant for those missions, you didn't have to worry about O12. Unless you were getting smashed and your key ops got removed, in which case now you've kind of got O12 as a way to bounce back a little bit.
Yeah, it sort of keeps you in the game, especially in a small one. You're probably not using your command tokens for too much more. Did you? I mean, you kind of already got that restriction with the point restriction, but did you have any restriction on wounds?
No. I
Yeah.
was kind of hoping that people just didn't go crazy. So, for example, running 2 Sujan, please don't.
Mhm.
I would just say run, like, if you're versing a new player, don't run 2 Sujan. Don't run 1 Sujan. Just run a normal list. So yeah, Infinity Melbourne community is really great for just being friendly and good sports. So it never really became an issue. And if 2 new players played against each other, go nuts. The crazy stuff you can. That's fine. Yeah.
Did you? I'm just wondering. Obviously, you made sure that the vets knew, like, this isn't a Shark Tank, right? We have a couple little guppies jumping in. Did you introduce them at all, being like, hey, these are the vets, right? If you're playing, like, they'll help you out more, or did you sort of just like in the
We
Melbourne
had a really good
community?
solution to that, actually.
In a roundabout way, we kind of did. So the first round of every slow grow, I would pair up a new player with a veteran player that
Okay.
I knew was going to be a good teacher or good mentor in that game.
Yeah.
So Kevin's a great example. He loves to play against new players. He loves to show them stuff. He loves to crazy koala smoke Yojimbo in CC.
Mm.
No, but so every round I got the new players. I paired them up with either myself, Kevin, Hugh, Val, just players that will talk through with you what you can do in your turn. They'll be interested in helping you, win and do good.
Yeah.
So people learned very quickly who the veterans were. I didn't specifically point out, go, hey, this is Val, Hector, blah blah blah. Yeah, but everyone was really good. Everyone was really good at helping.
I think your mission choice for the first tournament also helped because you could run those missions pretty well with one list in most factions, I think. So that opened it up to have the option for, here's my list if I play against a new player, here's my list if I play against an experienced player and want to kick their teeth in. So I ran 2 lists that were almost identical. My new player list had a Farzan. My experienced player list had a Fide.
Fair enough. So, yeah, just as far as like mission choice goes, obviously, like, even just the points, regardless of whether they're newer players or not, the points limits can make some missions very difficult, especially if they're like objective intensive. If you can off the top of your head, do you remember what you ran mission wise first?
I believe Nick has them.
Oh, there we
it's
go.
It was 4 out of 5 of the direct action missions. I believe there were 2 killy ones and 2 less killy ones.
So for the first tournament in the slow grow, it was superiority, cutthroat, battleground, and annihilation.
So annihilation was the only one that's not a direct action.
Annihilation is now a direct action mission.
Oh, is it?
They did not change how the mission works. They just moved it down to the direct action because it basically is a direct action mission.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's 4 rounds in the first slow grow because at 150 points you can fit 4 games in a day.
Yeah.
I will say, specifically for the round 1, I think this is a big learning lesson for me for the past 2 ones. I would consider and potentially recommend making the 150-point table slightly bigger.
Yes.
I know it's inconsistent with the mats you get in the starter sets, but 24 by 32 is actually really difficult to have a balanced game on.
Yeah, they are aggressively small.
And the half the problem is 2 of the missions have 12-inch DZs in a 32-inch table.
Yeah, so you've only got 12 inches separating you and your opponent.
You have less. You have 8 inches separating your DZs.
Yeah. There were I did not do
Oh,
this
you
to
do
one of the new
too.
players,
Yeah.
but I had a mission where I went second. They deployed a fire team on their deployment zone line, and I countered by deploying a Delami on the not over infiltrating in a position that was still on my side of the board and could light shotgun his fire team if he activated it.
Yeah, and that's the small template. If you had something with if you had like, not that you would use it necessarily, but you had a beast hunter who's got a heavy flamethrower, you can easily reach into the entire. Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking things like, I mean, a freaking bike in a short movement can make it. Like if you Penny doesn't break any of the rules that you had there, and would just start annihilating people.
Yeah, I think the 24x32 works fine if you dropped those down to 10-inch deployments.
Yeah.
I would actually go even. I would say 8 max for all the missions. 6 might be too much for the ones that are already 8, but I feel like 8 inches is a good length because it's almost mimicking the deployments in a regular infinity table, being a quarter. Either that, if you really want to run 32x24 because you have the mats, reduce the deployment zones, or make the tables bigger by 8 inches in each direction. That's what I would do.
Yeah, either or. But you've got to sort of, especially for like new players, stop that surprise of, even if you're like a new player playing a new player, if you know your profiles well enough, you'd be like, oh, I can run across this gap very easily. And you play another faction that's a little bit slower, and then suddenly got Cameronians in your face or whatever. That's fair enough. So then, what was your second point? This is the one I've always found sort of interesting. Is what was your second point? Like your second like point level.
What was the points for the second round or the second tournament?
Second tournament,
225. So
you
directly
went,
in between.
Yeah, so you actually went full in between. Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
So then my next question is that technically half a Swick?
Yeah, it's 4.5 Swick.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you actually went like full, like half a Swick. Okay.
Yeah, I think 225 is a good answer for a 3-round slow grow. But I do like that you preemptively told them how many Swick that accounted for, because normally it's in allotments of 50 points. So making sure that it's 25 points, so that's half of a Swick.
Yeah, and it's also a challenge, that middle round of, if you go to 220, so if you go to 250, the round afterwards isn't a big enough gap. But if you do 200, obviously that second round is not a huge jump. So 225 is a good jump. The problem is obviously it complicates the SWC, but if you hammer it into your players' heads enough, that they're going to understand, oh, I can only do 4.5, and maybe it's worth.
For a 3 tournament, I think 150, 225, 300 is excellent. If you went to a 4-round, then you could do 150, 200, 250, 300, depending on how.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did not expect for the 225 is how many people brought 2 full command groups. I went and brought a full 10 model, 1 command group at 225, and proceeded to play all 3 opponents who had 14 to 15 models.
I think when you start lifting the restrictions on like impetuous models, and all those sorts of things, people are suddenly like, ooh, I can take, I don't know, I mean, hell, I'm just thinking of Caledonia here. I guess I can take a whole bunch of volunteers, or whatever, like a regular impetuous unit is.
Galwegians.
Yeah.
Woo.
Yeah. And so I think that's just like the nature of it, where you take those restrictions and people start trying to break it as much as possible.
It's the nature of Infinity to have 9 dudes supporting one expensive dude.
Yeah, pretty much. And so what were the missions for that one? So obviously then you'd be getting into more Arcfinity missions.
Yeah.
So round 2 was Mind Wipe, Acquisition, and Cutthroat.
Yes, you got 3 arc missions, I believe.
Mhm.
I think acquisition is an arc mission, so.
And actually, this might be a good time to mention the score sheets you made.
Oh yeah, sure.
So, excuse my notes, but so he made custom score sheets for each of the tournaments, where it had a checklist of all the different victory point conditions for you to go through, plus notes about any key special rules. So, for instance, Mind Wipe, you noted that there was Uber Hacker with data erasure, and that hackers got a bonus to the
pressing the
checks.
button.
Yes. Doesn't go into the details on those rules, but it reminds you that they're there. So stuff like baggage or key ops, especially key ops.
Yeah, and this is something, at least in the terms of like the scoring and the victory points, that I've been seeing. I'm going to say just a lot in Australia at the moment, because we saw it in CanCon, where tournament organizers have been putting in the extra mile, potentially to simplify their own lives, but also to simplify their players' lives, where you get a sheet of paper, sometimes at longer tournaments at the very beginning of the day, where it's your first 2 rounds or your first 3 rounds, and you just mark out, these are the points we got, here's all the details of the scoring, you hand it in, you get it back after the scoring's done. But with Tristan, you putting down and mentioning like the special rules and things like that, I feel like, and this is totally like speculation, I feel like this sort of attitude really started at the last BCB, where the TOs there took a real active role in making sure like that players kept the time, right, that they knew what they were doing, and it was a really good sort of influence on the tournament, where I know at the very least, I like once or twice Nick Twohill came up, said like, hey, where you going, right? He would go around and tell people like, hey, you either need to hurry up, or if they were fine, he would just leave. And I'm just seeing across people running tournaments that, yeah, you get these really nice score sheets, and with what you're doing, Tristan, especially for a slow grow and the very first round of your slow grow, or yeah, it doesn't matter, it's the second round of your slow grow, to say like, hey, don't forget these rules, is a really powerful thing for the TO to do, to make sure that the players have the best experience possible. Because really, at that point, there's no excuse or to forgetting the rules. And in all fairness, you probably won't, because you'd be staring at it half the time, trying to think of where do I get my points from.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I liked this, because it made it more new player friendly, in that if they've got a moment, they're going, how do I get points again? They just look down and go, oh, it's right there. It's not, okay, pull up comm log, scroll through. Okay, what is that? No, it's right there. Check boxes.
And I also made an effort to try and simplify the wording of how you score points, because oftentimes it's very wordy. I'm guessing it's translated from Spanish, so sometimes it doesn't translate quite in an elegant way to read. So a lot of the times it'll be 2 sentences when really should say, kill more army points than your opponent.
Yes.
Like, it should be fairly simple.
Yeah.
Putting down the special things, especially because I forget them as well. Everyone has a moment where, oh, who's your hazmat ops, or who's your master breacher? And you go, oh no, the guy who it was going to be is actually dead because we're in the end of the first turn. Oh no. So just reminding everyone of that means they have the best game that they can. Sometimes you go, oh, I forgot my hazmat ops. I'm kind of feeling a bit iffy now. So
it also stops. So, like, I wasn't there, but one of the games that I heard about, at a friend's house. I'm trying to remember which one it was. It was one of the low grow, or one of the. Try to put there. Yeah, it was one of the direct action, and like the 10th point is have your key ops survive.
Mm.
And they got to the end of the game and went, I've got 9 points. Why can't I find the 10th point? Oh, because we never put our key ops on the board.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's especially for like, it's a good thing. It's a good thing to do, and I know like for some TOs, it is like, especially if you're a new TO and you don't do it right, and you're sort of in a new community, like sure, right, you know you're just starting off, but Tristan has I've been playing for a while. A lot of other players that are hosting tournaments have been playing for a while, and it's good to see sort of this natural evolution of this is the best way to host a tournament because it makes it easier on everybody.
Yeah.
I still always yeah, I still always hate calculating my VP at the end of it, but
you can tell that the person has calculated their score correctly and has written it all down. So if you need to, you can go back to it.
It's running tournaments is very much it's a massive burst of action when the round ends, and then you don't need to do much. You just TO or you play a really chill game with someone, and then the round ends and you go, "Oh, give me a score sheet, quick, 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 quick." And if everyone's sending you messages on Facebook, it can become a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
because you can go back and you have to check two things to cross check the scores, and sometimes only one person sends it, and then they don't give you the remaining points of their opponent, and you're like, oh my god, come on! So you have to go chase that person down. Then they've gone to lunch, so you need to grab your laptop and you need to go to lunch. You need to find, and it just becomes a pain in the ass. So you just make them fill out the score sheet before they leave and give it to you, and then you've got it. And then for round one, you can literally look at the score and go 5 TP, 5 TP, 5 TP, and you can organize it. You don't even need to write it in anything. You can organize it on paper and just go from the top. The top two, your top table. The next two, yeah. So it becomes way easier to do that.
Yeah, I think the only thing we now need to sort out is a way that that like OTM or whatever can actually automatically figure it out.
I had an idea with Peter. Peter and Kevin, to make so at BCB, if people don't know, there is a QR code and you scan it and then you put your score in. So it's almost like a digital score sheet. I had the idea is some people misinterpret scorings, or they misinterpret how you get certain points in missions, or they just remember wrong. So I had a thing where you have a separate QR code for each mission, and it runs you through questions. So question 1, did you kill more army points than your opponent? Yes. Did you do 1 or 2 classifieds? Yes. And at the end of it, you haven't calculated your score. You've just told basically a score sheet that I've done this and I've done that, and it calculates it for you. So there is no messing it up. There is no, ooh, Tio, I'm really sorry, I got the score wrong. Can you flip it? And then it swaps the placings, and you go, oh, sorry, we can't really do that because it's going to move 16 people a table down or something. That was my idea. It'd be super. It'd probably be really time consuming, but
actually, you could do it with one QR code if the first question was which round is it, and have that then link to a different.
That's very true.
Form.
Yep.
Yeah. Would be great if we could get like an official thing, and this didn't have to be a community built thing. But I'll be honest. I mean, even I think the biggest like war game in the world, Games Workshop, I don't think they have an official thing. I think it's still run off whatever community stuff they have.
To be fair though, their scores are super easy. It's this number and this number.
Yeah, true. So we'll move on to sort of the day. Actually, before we do, I wanted to ask: did you do sportsmanship during your slow grow?
So we definitely did best new player. We did, and then we focused on painting. So we had best painted and we had random painted.
Yeah.
And every round we had a painting requirement, which wasn't mandatory, but was would get you in for a prize. So the first round was just three models painted, which is super easy to achieve, and it just goes, oh, it's not a big hurdle. I can paint three models, and we was for that particular event, we were sponsored by Battle Kiwi. So if you got, you know, a random painting prize for painting three models, you could win yourself a voucher to buy yourself some cool stuff. So it was just an incentive. We didn't specifically have sportsmanship, but we had best new player and best painted. Sportsmanship could definitely be a aspect, but I focused the prizes mainly on painting and new players because most of the veterans in Melbourne kind of have what they want, know what they want.
Yeah, no, the only reason I asked is I remember, again, the last BCB sort of, they took a moment to explain to people like what the sportsmanship scores really meant, i.e., don't just give everybody a score of 5 because that means that everybody you play is some like saint, some infinity saint that's come down to the heavens to give you the best game you've ever had in your life. Most people should be sitting around 3 or 4, with like, you know, 2 being probably more, like maybe more reflective of a personality clash than anything else, unless of course someone scores like 2 across the entire tournament. But it's fine. All right. We're lucky here in Melbourne that we have probably a pretty set like personality types for Infinity, and they all get along.
We don't have a lot of disagreements.
Yeah, don't have. Have you? I don't know if you've ever gone back and watched. I was watching last night a movie called Razorback. It's a 1984 film based in the Australian outback. Fuck, the way they portray Australians back then.
Is it stereotypically bad?
It's like everyone in the I guess the best way to put it is like everybody in the outback is somewhere between I wish I remember her name is, but pretty much some sort of like version of Ivan Milat.
Right.
Which for anyone who doesn't know, Ivan Milat's a famous serial killer in Australia. No. So we don't have those sorts of personalities. Obviously, it's all we're all pretty good, and I think when you were saying a lot of the vet players love to teach newer players. I suppose
it's how you get new opponents and better opponents.
Yeah, exactly. But with the vet players, did you find that they were taking the round that they were playing a newer player as like a really like teaching almost a demo game, or do you feel like they were taking it more as like, I'll help them out if they get stuck, I'll give them a suggestion of like legitimately good things to do to stuff up my plan?
More that. It's if you have a baby and it's trying to walk, if it can walk, you know, hands free. If it's about to fall over, you catch it. If someone is about to run a tag into a very obvious repeater, you sit there and go, "Hey, bro, I'm about to total control your tag." Probably not the best idea. Maybe instead you want to, because your tag's super tall, he can vault this for free, and then you can see what you want to see. Something like that. It's all Infinity in Melbourne specifically is playing with intention first. So we don't specifically sit there and go, my intention is not to be seen every time you move for an order. You sit there and go, hey, I'm guessing your intention isn't to be seen. I'm just letting you know that this can see you.
Yeah.
Do you want to do something else?
I'll be honest. I think intent is like, I want to move here and not be seen. Like you stay there. I think in Melbourne we go the extra mile and be like, I know you're not trying to do what you're about to do, i.e., don't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we do go the extra mile.
Typically, the veterans were good. None of them were handholdy in terms of like, what you're doing is bad. You should do this, do this, do this. If they had an idea in their head as a new player, they let them do it. And if it wasn't something obviously bad, then let them do it. It's a learning experience.
I think in my games against new players, there wasn't really much handholding, but occasionally there would be points where I could see that they weren't quite sure which path they wanted to take. And so kind of just walk them through, kind of neutrally walk through, well, here's your options for, like, if you take the fire team this way, it'll encounter this. If you take it this way, it'll encounter this.
Yeah.
Here's another approach you can do. Pick which one you want. None of them are perfect. There are better ones and worse ones, but you're gonna have to pick what better option you like.
And sometimes I've had this when I'm playing new players before, like you don't know what they're doing, like when they first start spending their orders, and the quote unquote mistake that they're making doesn't unfold until to the point where you're like, there's no way we can like roll this back properly. So yeah, but I was just wondering, like with the vet players, and I suppose that's probably how you would prefer veteran players to play newer players in a slow grow, is that they like give advice when it's needed, try and keep the gameplay flowing, but are obviously not sitting there trying to teach them the game of Infinity.
Yeah, so most of the new guys we had knew the basic rules already, which was really good. There wasn't anyone who needed a particular demo game with like 3 line troops and a HI kind of thing.
Yeah.
They all had their own models. They all had, you know, decent collections, and they most of them had already played 300-point games.
Yeah.
So they kind of knew what they were doing.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay, yeah, so we sort of already covered this a little bit, but I guess we're sort of talking about the actual day of the tournament. Where I was going to ask sort of like, how did you sort out the okay, it's like when you actually sorted out the very first round, you specifically put noobs with veterans, or if was it random, and if it happened to be that a noob played a veteran, you were like, hey.
No, I specifically made pairings.
Okay.
If that sounds bad, I'm not sure.
No, I think I hadn't seen that before, and I liked it. It gives that opportunity for the training game if they need it at the very first. So the vet can identify, okay, this player needs more help. Let's see if we can get a player that has finished the round early, or the TO to spend more time watching and kind of guiding them some. It also sorts them. So the vets are usually going to come out on top of those games more than the new players, which means that the vets who want to go more hard get sorted with the other vets, and then the new players get a good game against a player who knows the rules, and then they can start playing against someone who is more on their experience level.
Yeah, that's actually like you as you're describing it. That's actually a good point. The sort of, I guess, the flow of fun throughout the day, where you got vet versus newer player, right? Vet, let's just say statistically wins. But he makes sure that it's a fun, like, good learning experience at that time.
Yeah.
Then it's a new player versus a new player where it's just a game with two less experienced players, while the vets go off and do their thing, and then at the very end you might end up with like, this is the best newer player, this is the vet
and that's what he did,
who's getting his shit kicked in, right? They come back together and just have a fun game, and then again you've got noobs and you've got vets.
Yeah,
I was also very lucky because I had Kevin to sometimes Gumby, and if a player was doing particularly bad on a day by round 3, you chuck them with Kevin and basically give them another learning game.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good. Mostly at the end of the day, Kevin and myself would pair ourselves against the bottom 2 players and try and give them a learning game.
And having them go up against a veteran player to begin with, also, like I mentioned, like flagging them for TO support, but it also means the next round, the tables that are new player versus new player, the TO can get feedback from the veteran players. Which of those tables should they watch more? Because some of the new players are going to get paired up and they're going to be fine. They've got a good, solid understanding of the rules. They're going to have maybe be struggling a little bit with tactics, but you want, as a TO, to know which table is the pair of new players who both need help with the rules.
Yeah.
And preferably before it's halfway through the round and they are still setting up.
Yeah, I suppose that's another thing that the veterans can really help with the new players is, helping counter deploy, telling them not to deploy. Unlike, because I remember, you're playing a newer player in like BCB or something, and you're like, I've got to let you make this stupid mistake because it'll be a huge advantage to me. I can't tell you, hey, don't put that guy out in the open when I'm going first because I'm just going to take an order off you really easily. Whereas in a slow grow, you get the opportunity where the person can go, don't do that. Like, it doesn't matter what I've got that you haven't seen, right? That's just going to be a disadvantage to you.
That's interesting you say that, Jacob, because I remember the very first game of my very first BCB, I was versing a very new player, and I put down a Crusher staring at a Morlock. He decided to put a second Morlock right next to the Crusher, and I went, hey, if you impetuous with either of them, it's going to splash both of them. Do you want to move them? And he went, nah, let's do it. I went, cool. So
learn from mistakes, yeah.
Well, look, I suppose that in that case, Tristan, you're a nicer man than me.
Oh,
not
when it comes to my dice.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm
going
to go back to our hobby. I'm going to go back to our hobby talk just for a second. Bloody Tristan, first roll with first firefight we have rolls a crit. I think by the end of turn 1, Tristan was on about 6 crits.
By the end of your first turn, I was on about 6 crits.
Yeah, it was fucking nuts. Anyway, back to regular program.
I had similar with the new player I played. I think it was first round of the first tournament, where they won the roll, they went first, and they deployed, and I looked at it and went, okay, we're going to talk about deployment now, because I will wipe your army if you set up that close together and in lines.
It's Infinity is probably one of the few games that you can lose in deployment.
Yes.
And some people don't understand that initially when they start playing.
Most war games, there's an advantage to setting up on the deployment zone line. Infinity, that will lose you a game.
Yes.
Yes, that's actually that's very true. Where I mean, having played a little bit of Age of Sigmar and stuff, I can't tell you how much you're like. So how far can I go up? And you're like pushing your models to the very limit of your deployment zone. Where unless there's cover, I can't think of many times recently that I've deployed. I think playing you, Tristan, was the first time in a while I've deployed right on the line.
But that's also table dependent as well. Like
exactly.
You had perfect trouble.
You're probably going to have 1 or 2 models that want to deploy there, but your army doesn't want to be there.
Yes, not your whole army.
Yeah. So, how did you work round length? Given that there's newer players, did you kind of stick with what the recommended is? Did you go longer?
So for round 1, I believe it was about an hour and a half each round. For some players, that's a perfect amount of time. There are always going to be stragglers. It's kind of up to you as a TO to be like, hey, it's a 150-point tournament. We don't need to go hard. Just do something. It was mainly for the first round, just being able to fit in 4 games. 3 games, some players might only play for an hour and a half in terms of total game time because they might be quite quick. So getting 4 rounds in at smaller points is good. And then the other two rounds kind of just fit into 3 rounds, so 2 to 2.5 hours. We tried to get it so that we could go a little bit later in case some new players, needed a little extra time. But there is restraints on people's lives. You know, they have to go home to their kids. They have to do stuff like that. They have to take their terrain with them. So there is also the learning experience for new players to be able to fit a game into a tournament schedule.
Yes, true.
It just kind of fit in naturally, to be honest. I didn't think about it too much aside from round one. You can fit in 4 games. Let's map it out. Yeah, we've played in so many Infinity tournaments. It seems natural at this point.
I liked the 4 rounds in one day, and I could see it from a new player perspective. That's going to give them more experience in, well, both keeping to clock, but also more experience deploying in a tournament situation. More experience, working under that time, and
you have the ability to play a game, learn from a game, take that into the next game, and do that 3 times instead of only having 2 games, feeling like you get smashed in the first 2, and then maybe in the 3rd game you go, "Oh, I have a good deployment." It's for new players. It's very much a learn through like repetition. So lots of smaller games is better than one big game.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. So I think for yours, you encouraged painting by having random painting prizes, best painted, and slowly scaling that up, the requirement throughout the league.
Yeah.
Did you
talk about?
Oh yeah, did you find because that's one thing we didn't mention necessarily. I didn't mention up top, which is you had about a month gap between each round.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
3 weeks.
It was a little faster than I expected, but
that's a little tight. That's a little tight for a slow grow, but obviously, I mean, okay, well, for 3 weeks, like obviously from our reaction and from your reaction, that's a little bit tight for each round, between each round of slow grow. What do we think would be, especially when you've got like sort of you're encouraging painting and that sort of thing, would be, I guess, the optimal sort of length of time?
Monthly.
Yeah.
Monthly.
I think monthly is fine.
Yeah.
And that could even be like a 3-week and then a 5-week gap or something there. It's over 3 months. Yeah. 4 weeks probably good.
Yeah. I'm assuming when you get into like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, it's probably too long. You're sort of losing interest at that point. Or you're risking losing interest.
You don't want to go too long. No. You want to keep it so that, especially what I did is Kevin and I organized the venue for the next event before that event. So when round 1 happened, we had round 2 event sorted out. We just hadn't posted it yet. So when people got home, I would post it. So they get home, they go, "Ooh, round 2's up," and they'd always know, what would be happening.
And I think I know the answer to this, but as far as obviously, TOs, unless you're really bankrolling your Infinity community, TOs and all the community has to come together financially to like fund a tournament. How did you do? Like people pay just each round, didn't they?
Yeah, it's per round thing. So for us, round 1 was less money from memory, but the following 2 rounds were $20 each, which is the typical. Depending on the cost of your venue, it depends on really how you want to go. If you want to really encourage lots of people, you can even go down to just venue cost.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get the prizes in there for the painting and the new players and stuff. If you're considering a round each month or even a round every 3 weeks, maybe consider making it slightly cheaper so people aren't forking out a ton of money they don't feel like they financially can't participate.
Yeah. So I suppose then the question I was having is, what would you think if you said, like, given that it's a league, sort of you sign up for the 3 months, you pay it all sort of at once?
Probably not, because then you start getting people who don't come to round 2 and 3, and you start having to give refunds for partial refunds and stuff like that. I would just go for a round by round basis. It makes it a lot cleaner in terms of organizing prizes per round, especially if you're doing different venues. Because if House of War is $5 a head and Collingwood is a set price per hour, your cost for the venue is completely different. Like I have a set cost for one venue, no matter how many people are there. But then we go to House of War or Gaming Arena, and it's per head. So that's just a variable amount of venue cost.
Fair enough. Plus, like life gets in the way, right?
Yep.
You might have a situation where, oh no, something's happened and I can't run round 3. And all of a sudden, you don't need to start doing anything or whatever. You don't need to start giving refunds. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You'll also get more people to sign up if they don't have to sign up for all 3.
That's very true.
It also means that, like, if you've got a new player who really doesn't have enough models to hit 300 points and doesn't really want to expand that quickly, they can do round 1 and 2, and then just not do round 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, you could definitely have someone who's like, I'm super new. I've like me when I first did it, read the rule book, so I know how the game works. But I just want to get a starter box, see how I like it, see if it's worth it. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fair enough. Again, we're just trying to look at how you run it, how we feel people should run it, and yeah.
I would say use your judgment for your community. Our community, it's very standard to have $20 tournaments. In your community, that might not be a thing. It might be more expensive, it might be less expensive. Just use your judgment.
Yeah. And we should also point out that, if you've got a big enough friend group and you're all sort of looking to start a war game and you all sort of, you're similar enough that you all love the look or feel or whatever of Infinity, you could just run a slow grow like league with all the things that we're talking about between yourselves. Right, just be like, hey guys, we're just gonna rock up to the House of War in our case, or whatever your friendly local game store is. We're going to play this points limit, and then the next one, it's just about you challenging your friends at that point to get them put together, as painted as much as possible. I suppose at that point, if you really wanted to deal anything with money, you do like a little kitty for a prize.
Or snacks.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. If you're trying to run a slugger league and it's trying to get it started from new and you don't have that many players, you could always just, instead of running it as a tournament, run it as a round robin.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if you've only got 4 players, well, there's you've got 3 rounds.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just play everyone.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And just. All right, and then just the next time you meet up with your friends to play Infinity, right, we're doing 225 point rounds. Right, we're going to just slow go by ourselves. There's nothing wrong with. All right, you don't have to have sort of a tournament set up, especially if you're a new community. You've got to get terrain together, models together, all those sorts of things. You're better off just trying to get that sorted however you can.
With a 24 by 32 table, you need less terrain.
And you can use anything for terrain.
Oh yeah.
I mean, look, we are blessed in as players of Infinity that, especially with the new stuff that's come out, is that the new cardboard train is pretty good. It looks decently nice. It's thick, unlike the old stuff that was a bit flimsy and models would have a hard time standing still on it. The new stuff's good. You get, if you've got 4 people and everyone buys 2 sets of the terrain each, you've got more than enough to fill out those small mats. Probably enough to get to the 225.
You only need, realistically, they recommend, I would say 2 per small mat, but you can get away with 1 quite easily.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, you get it with 1, and then you put in some blocks or some, soda cans or anything. Yeah.
I mean, what
you've got a nice buildings to play around with height and maneuverability, and they just get some blocking terrain as well.
Yeah. Don't forget that like the one of the best tables we have here in Melbourne that I think Kev has a hold of is full of like rusted up soda cans that look like tankers.
Oh yeah,
Pringles cans.
Yeah, like plenty of like toilet roll things and things like that. So you've got if you've got toilet rolls, some glue, and like the ability to make them look rusty, you're good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. One thing I think we forgot to ask, for existing players, how did you define a new faction or a new army for them?
Yeah, so specifically, because Kevin and I talked about it, and he made the argument that, well, maybe some people want to take an old faction off the shelf that they haven't played for 4 or 5 years. Maybe they don't want to buy into a whole new faction, and I get that. So the limit I put on it was you can't have taken it to any 2-day event since the pandemic ended. So since BCB of 2022. I want to say.
So basically, not taking it to a 2-day event in the last 2 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because myself included, a bunch of 1-day events. I like taking random factions, so I'll take for example, in the slow grow last time I played you with Shaz, and then I played Vanilla Pano in a 1-day event, just limited insertion because it felt cool. You don't want to stop people from playing that just because they played it once in one event. Yeah.
No, that's fair enough. And I suppose I was going to ask with the painting, with sort of the time, the 3-week time crunch. How did you find like people got around to getting their models painted?
Pretty good. By the end of it, we had 5 fully painted players out of 15 or 16.
Any of those any of those the new players?
Yes, 2 or 3.
Oh wow. Okay. So most
so Will won best painted, and he was a new player with his lovely red JSA. Yes. I think there are some pictures on Discord. I think there's a picture on Discord actually. And then we had Jesse with Assassins. We had Callum's an old player, but he had his Nomads. We had Daniel I won't say Daniel's a new player. He's a newer player with his Assassins as well, I think.
There were a few Assassins. Yeah.
There's a couple of Assassins just because of
there was actually a fair amount of new players were playing some variant of Hawk.
Yes.
Because we had one Rama, I think 2 Assassins, and then I can't remember if there was, and then myself bouncing around in not Rama space. Oh, and we had someone had QK.
Dante played QK for round 2. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The other important thing is don't expect people to play the same army throughout the all 3 events. Some people want to swap. That's perfectly fine. Let them do that.
Yeah, I mean, I did like where you said you were playing Assassins and then you like pivoted into Vanilla Huck.
Yeah.
I suppose, especially with a veteran player, if they bring out an army they haven't played for a long time, they decide, I remember why I shelved these guys. I suppose the only thing I would say is if you are one of those players who's been in the community a little bit, sort of try and encourage them to try and stick with what they've started with. I reckon pivoting is fine in any case, but let's say going from JSA to Hawk Islam or something like that.
I think for new players who are on their first army, I would definitely encourage them just to stick it out and learn that, because even if it's not the right army for them, playing enough of it will let them know what type of army they want to play.
Yeah. And they'll play against a lot of different armies throughout the slow grow. They'll play 10 rounds and hopefully 10 different armies or 9 different armies. So they'll get a good idea of what their playstyle suits.
Yeah. Whereas like you mentioned, like I played Assassins the first round and went, it's just not gelling for me, and went, okay, let me try vanilla, and I miss fire teams, but I stuck it out with vanilla.
I was really tempted to jump on vanilla because I bought a Maggie, and I don't think a Maggie suits the Shat very well. So I'm like, probably suits vanilla better. But then I looked at it and went, oh god, it's probably like the best gun in the faction.
I think it is. I think
actually,
that's what a lot of people think.
Aside from a Zayden, maybe.
Wait, so Maggie, I think fits pretty well into Deshot, just because Deshot can run enough cheap stuff that
but
you don't feel like
all the cheap stuff is impetuous. If you want a bunch of cheap stuff, you end up with a Maggie and 5 irregulars, and you have. Wow. Okay. I think it suits vanilla better than Deshat. I won't say it's bad in Deshat. I think vanilla supports a Maggie better, if even just to say because it has mutts and killer hacking devices.
Okay, fair.
But I went to vanilla Huck and went, ooh, is the Maggie the best gun I got? Ooh, I don't like this. And then I jumped on Cosmo and went, oh, yeah, this is better.
Wait, you played Cosmo during your slow grow?
Oh, sorry. I was just lamenting on Vanilla Huck how I loved Assassins because they had some firepower. You go to Vanilla Huck and you lose the fire teams, and you lose a lot of firepower.
Yeah, no,
you have to play a completely different way to get around certain situations.
Yeah, no, I remember now where you were. I remember your saga of playing Deshat and then giving up and going to
Deshat
Cosmo,
hits like a wet noodle.
Yeah.
I played into Morat so many times and went, I cannot deal with this. I have nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. At some point I need to get back to trying Maggie again. I just had a really bad experience the first time I tried to play her. Because we played at a table that did not have any terrain that was tall enough to block line of sight to her.
Yeah. And she's expensive, and she isn't any better than a regular battle tag.
She has a few tricks, but they're usually not worth the orders.
They're not worth the points either.
Okay, well that's true.
A Squalo is like 10 points cheaper, and it has NCO and a better gun.
I think honestly, it's like one of the best things about her, for a couple of particular missions, is the fact that her pilot's a specialist and she has baggage.
I mean, it's cool to spend 10 orders on her and shoot like 20 mines down range or something silly, but yeah.
Well,
it's just a really cool model.
It is. It is. And to be honest, while it is dated, I appreciate the aesthetic of even the oldest model that they have. The little like it looks like a fighter jet with legs. Well, I think we have covered slow grow leagues to their completion. Thank you, Tristan, for coming on and giving us a perspective of someone who's recently run one of these slow grows. It seems like it went obviously really well, and had the bonus of getting those new players out into the community, get their faces and their names known, so that they can jump in, join the veteran players, learn, become staples in the community. I know that we've all been a new player once, so it's good to see that, and hopefully people got to use that as an encouragement to prepare for ARC, which is happening as of this recording at the end of the week.
Yes. Yeah.
But with that, we're going to say goodnight. So thank you for listening, everybody. I've been Jacob.
I've been Nick.
I've been Tristan.
Good night.
Good night.
Butt faker.